Okay? And you got to remember that all these verses, they're dealing with the Old Testament. Just because the New Testament is not out in the time of Jesus, right? They wrote that after. So during the time of Jesus, what were they using? They were using the Old Testament. And obviously, in the time of Daniel, what were they using? They were using the books of Moses. Okay, so getting the knowledge, applying it to your life, and approaching God through that knowledge and through doing the will of God, which is submitting to Him, submitting to His will, and letting go of your own will. Okay? That's switching from living a life for yourself and living a life for God. That's how you approach God. When God sees you do that, He's going to approach you. Okay. All right, so now let's take a look at Ezekiel 8:17. Now, here we have God. He's talking about the corrupt congregation. Right? He says in Ezekiel 8:17, then he said unto me, hast thou seen this? Speaking to Ezekiel, God speaking to Ezekiel. He says, then he said unto me, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah that they commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence, and they have returned to provoke me to anger, and lo, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore I will also deal in fury. Mine eye shall not spare, neither will I have pity. And though they cry in mine ears with a loud voice, yet will I not hear them. So he's saying, look, God's telling Ezekiel, do you see these people, the house of Judah? Do you see what they're doing? They're disobeying me. They're breaking the law that I've set forth. They're worshiping idols. They're committing violence in the land. And by the way, if you look up what the word that was translated into violence is, it's also, what it means is it can mean violence. It can mean cruelty or injustice, right? So what they're doing is they're basically being evil. But yet, they would still try to approach God, even though they were living a life of sin that God hates. So he says, even though they cry in his ears with a loud voice, yet will I not hear them. So that means if you're living in sin, you're breaking the law, you're living in sin, breaking the commandments, God's not going to hear you, even if you cry aloud. If you cry aloud, God still's not going to hear you. Why? Because you don't respect His word. You brush aside the commandments and say, I can have my cake and eat it too. Well, if you want to eat your cake, don't expect God to approach you through your prayer. Don't expect Him to hear your prayer. Now, if you want God to hear your prayer, you got to do everything in your power. Be the best you can be. Love God with all your might, with all your strength, with all your mind, everything you got. Approach Him in that way. Pray and He'll approach you. Right? Because through these verses, we're discovering how God hears your prayer and how God turns a deaf ear to your prayer. There is no in between here. You got to humble yourself. You got to submit yourself to God. Right? You have to submit yourself to God. Just like Daniel did. For from the first day thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. You want God to come for your words? Do what Daniel did. Daniel is one of the smartest, if not the smartest person in the Bible. Right? He might be the wisest person in the Bible. Personally, I think he's the wisest person in the Bible. Some may say, oh no, that's Solomon. Solomon's the wisest person. I think Solomon could have been the wisest person. But you have to remember that God made a deal with Solomon, and God said basically, look, Solomon, if you submit yourself to me, you're going to be the wisest man in the world, okay? It was a conditional deal, right? It wasn't just okay, Solomon, you made a great sacrifice to me, so here you go. Here is the wisdom of, the highest wisdom of any man on earth. Here you go, unconditionally. No, there was conditions attached to it. And that condition was that he remained faithful to God. But we know that he did not remain faithful to God. And that's why the kingdom was basically ripped out of his son's hands, right? And that's where you have the division of Israel. Okay, so sorry, I went off on a little tangent there. Okay, James had it right too. James says here, he said, ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lusts. So here you go. You have somebody who is asking God for something, right? Praying, but they're not receiving it. Why? Because they asked amiss. They asked in sin. What does sin mean? Sin means to miss the mark. They asked amiss. In sin, they were asking for stuff. Right? I mean, it's been thousands of years and people still haven't changed, right? We're still human. We're still, stumbling through the darkness. Because we like the idea of approaching God, but we don't necessarily like the idea of the work we have to put in to approach God. Because you do. You have to. You have to transform yourself. You have to submit yourself to God. And that is not saying, God, I submit myself to you. There we go, done. I'm submitted to God, everybody. Woohoo, let's go party. No. That's not how it works. You have to change. Everything that you know that displeases God, take it out of your life. Whether that's drinking, whether that's doing drugs, whether that's pornography, whether that's changing your outlook on life. Okay, these are all things that are hard to do because it's hard to change. But you can do it with the help of God, right? Because anything is possible with God. Things may be impossible for men, but with God, nothing's impossible. If you want God to hear your prayer, you have to do the things that are acceptable for God. Don't ask God for anything in sin and think you're going to get it. Because like James says, you ask and receive not because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lusts. You're asking for things in sin. Don't do that anymore. I know it's going to be hard, but you could do it. If you really want to, you could do it. Like I said, people love the idea of approaching God, but they do not like the idea of the work they have to put in to approach God. Because it is work. Right? Nobody wants to work, right? Everybody likes money, but nobody wants to work to get that money. But we know from living in this life, that's what you got to do. Sure, there's other things that you would like to do besides go to work, but you got bills to pay, right? You have to do it. And working is a good thing. You develop yourself. So develop yourself in the eyes of God, and God will take you from where you are now and develop you into something you had no idea was out there. He has things waiting for you. It's up to you to claim them. This is one of the basic steps. It's a hard step, no doubt. Why do you think many are called and few are chosen? Because nobody wants to do the work. But dedicate yourself to God. Dedicate yourself to God and make that commitment. Start taking all that garbage out of your life that God doesn't like, and start to submit yourself to God. Submit yourself. Stop lying. Stop cheating. Stop denying justice for others. Stop being evil. Stop coveting. Stop being adulterous. Stop bearing false witness. All this stuff, it's all garbage. Okay? Be the best you can be for God. And what is that? Jesus boils it down beautifully. He says, love God and love thy fellow man as thyself. Easy, right? Sounds easy. That means you got to cut all the garbage out, because if you lie, if you steal, if you cheat, if you covet, that is not loving your fellow man. That is actually committing evil against your fellow man. So cut it out. Cut out all the evil and do what's right in the sight of God. Love him, love your neighbor as yourself. Approach him through prayer, and you're going to find out exactly how effective that is. Just like Daniel found out. All of a sudden, he sees a beautiful angel approaching him. And the supernatural happened to him because he obeyed God. Obey God and see God working in your life. Maybe you won't see an angel, but maybe you'll see a sure sign that you're in the Lord's favor, and you'll also see the generosity of God. God bless. Until next time.